All right, this is again another lesson for reading multiple choice, single answer, multiple choice, multiple answer. This is part 2 of the series of reading multiple choice, multiple answer. And there are a few extra things that I want to discuss, specific things that I want you to discuss to get your head around that is going to also help you in your reading multiple choice, multiple answer section. Okay, so let's get right into it. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Straightforward, we've got 3 items that we want to discuss today. The first one is identifying the gist of the passage. So sometimes you're going to get a prompt where it's going to ask you to explain the gist of the passage, the main idea, the topic of the passage, and how do we tackle that sort of question. Second thing, we will understand the context to infer the meaning of certain words. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with certain words, how do we look at the context and understand the meaning of those words? Third thing that we're going to talk about is that can we use the same strategy for every prompt that you get? So how do we amend our strategy based on the type of prompt that you're going to get? Because sometimes you're going to get the type of prompt where it says, explain to me the gist of the passage, or sometimes it's going to say, well, what is the meaning of this word? So we're going to have to look at the prompt, and really depends on the prompt of what type of prompt you get and how do we amend our strategy based on the prompt. Okay, so let's get right into it. First, we're going to identify and summarize the gist of the passage. So sometimes you're going to get a prompt where it's going to ask you to explain the gist of the passage. And there, you really need to understand what is the gist of the passage, or what is the main idea behind that passage. So let's look at this prompt. For example, the first prompt here we have is, which of the following can be inferred from the text? Suggest a synonym or paraphrase. Inferred, for example, implied, assumed, presumed, concluded. What can be concluded? What can be inferred? What can be implied? These are some of the verbs that will be used for you to explain the gist of the passage, right? So assumed, presumed, concluded. What can be concluded from this passage? Now, what the prompt is asking you to do is choose between options that are correctly or incorrectly making a conclusion about a fact in the text. Okay. Now, what would be the best strategy to tackle a question with such a prompt is to read the passage first. So the strategy that you have here is not to read the options first. You will have to read the prompt and then straight away read the passage first. Okay. When the prompt is asking you the gist of the passage, you gotta read the passage first to be able to understand the options. You don't want to read the options first. You want to read the passage first. Again, I'm repeating, read the passage first when it's about the gist of the passage, not the options. If you read the options, you will be wasting your time. So you want to read the passage first, and then if you read the if you read the options, it will be much easier for you to select the option, because what you're looking for is really the summary of the passage, right? So read the passage first, or to read the options. In this case, it is better to read the passage first to prevent becoming confused by the options. Okay, so let's do a practice here. First, we are going to read the prompt to understand what type of question we got here. Which of the following can be inferred from the text? Again, it will give you a verb like inferred or concluded, what can be concluded or what can be implied. All of these verbs are assumed. These are some of the words that will be used for you to understand that it's about the gist. And in this case, we're not going to be reading the options. We're going to be reading straight away the passage to understand what is the gist of the passage, right? So let's look at this passage and how do we summarize. So please, you can pause the video here, read the passage, and please write a sentence to summarize the gist of the passage. And when you come back, we're going to do it together. All right, I hope you had a chance to read the passage by yourself, and you had a chance to write a sentence to summarize the gist of the passage, okay? Now I'm going to read the passage, and you can look at my approach of how I'm going to summarize this passage. Okay, the artists were not a rich man's frivolous addition to his entourage, but an essential part of a scientific theme in the age before photography, right? So artists were actually the essential part of the scientific theme before photography. So when we didn't have photography, artists were the ones who were drawing everything, and they were the essential part of the scientific theme. It kind of gives me, the first sentence kind of gives me the main topic of the whole passage, okay? Now I'm going to read more detail to understand the supporting details here. Their principal task is referring back to the artist. So their principal task was to draw the specimens that the scientists collected, okay? Although the naturalists, such as Banks, intended to preserve some of their specimens and take them home to England. It would not be practical to do so with all of the specimens, right? Banks also expected to dissect certain animals, and the artists would preserve a record of this work. Okay, so when artists were also drawing and preserving all of that work as well that Banks performed. In addition to their scientific drawings, Banks wanted the artists to sketch the people and places they visited. So they were also sketching the people and places that that the Banks visited as well. Okay. So if I were to summarize the sentence in one sentence, if I wanted to summarize the gist of the passage, I'm just going to say the most important thing here. The gist of the passage is that the artists were an essential part of scientific theme or Banks' work before the age of photography. That will be my summary for the whole passage. Okay. Now let's look at the options here. Now I've already read the passage, so reading the options is going to be super easy for me to eliminate the incorrect ones, the incorrect summaries, because if I read the options first, the problem with that is that I don't really know what I'm going to get in terms of what kind of passage I'm going to get. So it might be confusing for me. So I don't want to be reading and wasting my time reading the options. I want to be reading the passage first and then the options. And when I read the options, I already know the summary. I already know the main point. So when I read the options, I already can eliminate and very easily select the correct option. So let's read the first option here. We've got photography eventually made scientific expeditions more productive. Nowhere in the passage it says that photography eventually made scientific expedition more productive. It doesn't talk about photography being more productive than the artist's work. So I can eliminate that straight away because I already have the background. Artists performed a variety of tasks in early specific explorations. Now this sounds like my summary that I summarized. Artists performed a variety of tasks. It talks about their drawings. It talks about drawings, sketches of people and places, also preserving the record of the Banks' works. It talks about various functions that artists performed. So that seems correct. So I'm going to keep it for now, and I'm going to read the next two sentences. Naturalists themselves were often talented artists. That's actually wrong because naturalists are the Banks and they were not the artists. Actually, they were using the artist's works, so that I can eliminate easily. Dissecting specimens was not as useful as taking them to England. It doesn't really talk about dissecting a specimen as being useful, so I can eliminate that as well. So my correct option that my preferred option that I feel is correct will be artists performed a variety of tasks in early scientific explorations, and I'll stick with that. So you see how powerful it is when you read the summary first and then you read the options. It's straight away going to help you to identify the correct answer. So let's look at the options here and the explanation. The first option, obviously, photography eventually made scientific expeditions more productive. This response is incorrect, although the text implies that photography became a part of scientific expeditions later on. The text does not imply that photography made scientific expeditions more productive. It doesn't talk about anything that implies that photography was more productive than the artist's drawings. Okay. Now this option, the second option, artists performed a variety of tasks in early specific explorations. This response is correct because the writer states that artists drew specimens, recorded dissections, and sketched people and places visited during early scientific exploration. So they've done quite a lot of work, and about obviously a variety of tasks refers to that. So that's the correct option here. Now let's talk about the third option. Naturalists themselves were often talented artists. This response is incorrect because this response is not addressed in the text. The writer does not state whether naturalists were or were not talented artists, okay? Rather, it says that they used the works of talented or the artist, right? So we can eliminate that for that reason. Last one, dissecting specimens were not as useful as taking them to England. This response is incorrect because the writer states that naturalists preserved or dissected some of the specimens they found. The writer neither implies or nor states whether preservation was more useful than dissection, right? So that's the information that is not in your passage, so we can eliminate that for that reason. All right. Now we're going to talk about using context to identify the inferred meaning of unfamiliar words. Now, sometimes you will come across some words and you may not know the meaning, but how do we infer them? How do we understand the meaning of those words? Well, you can look at the context of the whole passage to guess the meaning of the words. And I'm going to show you just that, how do we do that, okay? Some strategies for dealing with unfamiliar words. Inaccessible, for example, inaccessible. Special provision is made for inaccessible, and you might have a sentence like that. Special provision, you'll have to read the context. So now I'm reading the context to understand the meaning of inaccessible. If you may know the meaning of this word, you may not know the meaning of this word. I'm just showing I'm showing you the approach, what will be required to guess or infer the meaning of inaccessible. All right, special provision is made for inaccessible outback areas, with modern technologies bringing teaching to the bush. So look at the words in the context. You've got outback and bush. Where have you seen or heard these words? Think about the words that you might have seen or heard. What do they make you think of? Break the words down into parts. Outback, outback, inaccessible, accessible, inaccessible, inaccessible, etc. If you break it down, it will help you to understand the words. So let's just look at this word: ubiquitous, persistent, and unanticipated. Now, it was ubiquitous with every category of crime falling in every part of the country. So, and there are a few words here, so I'm going to read the whole paragraph here to look at these three specific words. If you don't know the meaning, how I'm going to approach and how I'm going to understand these words. The first one is ubiquitous, with every category of crime falling in every part of the country. Second one is it was persistent, with incremental decreases year after year. And it was entirely unanticipated, especially by every expert who had been predicting the opposite. Okay, so the first one, if we analyze the first one, what is the phrase that tells us the meaning or kind of hints the meaning of ubiquitous? The meaning of ubiquitous is reflected in the phrase every part of the country. Now, if you look at every part of the country, that means it's everywhere. right? So the meaning of ubiquitous means everywhere. It was present everywhere that the crime of every category of crime is falling. So ubiquitous should mean that everywhere, every part of the country, it is falling. Okay, so that's how I will kind of think of the meaning if I don't know the meaning. The meaning of persistent, for example, can be inferred from the phrase year after year. Year after year means, persistent means year after year. That means it's consistent. So persistent can also be consistently falling. That's how I'm going to think of the meaning of persistent. The meaning of unanticipated can be inferred from a phrase, experts have been predicting the opposite. So if they have been predicting the opposite, that means it was not predicted. It is unanticipated, something that they did not predict. That should be the answer. That should be the meaning of this word. Now, in terms of paraphrasing, ubiquitous can be paraphrased to everywhere and wide-ranging. That's the meaning of ubiquitous, everywhere, wide-ranging, right? And they can use these kind of fancy words because obviously this is your reading test, and they're trying to understand if you they're trying to check your knowledge of vocabulary and if you know how to predict the meaning of unfamiliar words by looking at the context, right? That's the skill they're testing you on. Persistent, the synonym here is unstoppable and regular, right? Or consistent. Unanticipated, unexpected, surprising. These are some synonyms for this word, and you can paraphrase it that way. And that's how you would be looking at the context and predicting the meaning of the word. Okay, so always look at the context. Whenever you have trouble understanding the meaning of unfamiliar word, you will have to look at the context. Now, the reason why I'm showing you all of this is because the options that will be presented to you, you might have the synonym with those options. Okay, and if you can look at the context and predict the meaning of the word, for example, the prompt might say to you, what can be inferred by looking at the context of the word ubiquitous or persistent or unanticipated. Okay, and we're going to look at an example where you will have to do just that. So let's do this exercise, worksheet 1. So first, we're going to read the prompt here. This is multiple choice, multiple answer. So we're going to read the prompt first. Presuming this statement to be true, what might we also presume to be true about previous or other methods used to measure single crystal structures? Tick the most relevant options. So before reading the options, I'm going to read the statement here. Modern X-ray crystallography provides the most powerful and accurate method for determining single crystal structures. Okay, so we have been given a method, which is modern X-ray crystallography, provides the most powerful and accurate method for determining single crystal structures. So this method right here is the most powerful and accurate for determining. The prompt asks us to look at the previous method or the older methods, the other methods that were used to measure single crystal structures. Which one is true? So what are the options that are true about the older methods, the previous methods? Okay, the first one says they definitely did not use X-ray. Now, if you talk about modern X-ray crystallography, it's used the X-ray now, and it didn't use the X-ray in the past. So that could be my correct answer. So I'm gonna tick that. They perhaps did not use X-ray. Well, I think they didn't use X-ray, but it's definitely they didn't use X-ray. So I'm gonna stick with my first option. Second option cannot be correct. Either first or second can be correct. Okay, so I'm sticking with my first option because they did not use X-ray in the past. Then we talk about the third option. They were the most powerful and accurate methods for determining single crystal structures. Well, that can't be true because it's contradicting my statement here on the top, because this new method is most powerful and accurate, not the older one was most powerful. Okay, so I can eliminate that. They were less powerful. That is true because the new one is most powerful, and they were less accurate. This is also true because the new one is more powerful and more accurate. Okay. Last one, they were better for determining multi-crystal structures. Now, if you look at the prompt here, it says methods used to measure single crystal. The question is asking you about single crystal, so we don't really have to worry about the multi-crystal structures. So I can eliminate that. Okay, now let's look at the correct answer. Yes, the first one is they definitely did not use X-rays. And the fourth option and fifth option is correct. They were less powerful and they were less accurate. Now, what I want you to do is, again, inferring the words, like these are some of the activity that, this is the activity that we will do to understand synonyms, okay? And I want you to learn synonyms because it's going to help you to be able to infer the meaning from the context, okay? So I want you to pause the video here, do this exercise on your own. I want you to look at the words on the left-hand side and look at the words on the right-hand side and match them for there's a similar meaning or synonym, okay? So when I come back, I'll see you and we will discuss later. All right, I hope you had a chance to match the words together for a similar meaning. Now let's look at the answers. Products, another word for product is goods. Significantly, you can use notably. To err means to make a mistake. Taxes, tariffs. Tariffs is form of tax. Revolutionary, original. Inaccuracy, discrepancy. Compulsory, obligatory. Representation, depiction. Orientation, direction. To curb, to prevent. Okay, so you'll see that sometimes you will be given an on the left hand side the words can be changed for the words on the right hand side, because that's how your reading task will work in your options and the context. Okay, so synonyms, learn a lot of synonyms because they're definitely going to help you in your reading task. All right, in this one I want you to think of the opposite, which is antonyms, okay? Antonyms are the words that have the opposite meaning, right? So if you've got solar, what is the opposite of solar, okay? So pause the video here, do this exercise, and then when you come back, also what I want you to do this as well. So put P if it's a positive meaning, write down P next to the word if it's a positive meaning. If it's a negative meaning, please write down N. And if it's a neutral meaning, please write down LN. NL, right? Okay. So pause the video here, do this exercise on your own, and when you come back, we'll discuss the answers. All right, I hope you had a chance to look at these words and the opposite meanings of these words, antonyms. And you also had a chance to look at, think about if these words have a positive meaning or a negative meaning or a neutral meaning. Now let's look at the answers. So solar, the opposite of solar is lunar. Compulsory, optional, wild, civilized, empty, occupied, feast, famine, respectable, disreputable, objectivity, subjectivity, maddening, delightful, soggy, crisp, typically, unusually. Now, solar is a neutral meaning, and lunar is also neutral meaning. Compulsory is neutral, optional is also neutral, wild is negative, civilized is positive, empty, neutral, occupied, neutral, feast, positive, famine, negative, respectable, positive, disreputable, negative, objectivity, neutral, subjectivity, neutral, maddening, negative, delightful, positive, soggy, neutral, crisp, positive, and typically you've got neutral and usually neutral, okay? Now, again, we talked about there are few prompts where you can, where it's going to ask you for gist, and the best strategy for those ones is that you read the prompt and then you read the passage before you read the options. Sometimes you'll have to read the options before you read the passage, okay? So it really depends on what kind of prompt you're looking at, right? So read the prompt and recognize the strategy needed. Let me ask you this question. Is it necessary to read the passage in detail to identify gist, etc.? If not, why? So if you answered no, not always, it really depends, is because there are different types of passages, and I want to show you an example of that. So for example, if you look at the prompt here, the prompt asks you, which of the following words have the same meaning in the passage as residences? And that's the exercise that we did for synonyms and inferring the meaning, is because you will get some prompts that is going to ask you just that, okay? So reading the summary is not going to help you because you're looking for a specific word here. So in this case, and if you look at the note on the left-hand side, in this case, it is not necessary to identify the gist because the prompt asks for meaning of specific words in the text. Residents look for the word in the passage and guess the meaning from the context, right? Okay, so reading the passage is not going to help you. You will have to read the options first, and then you read the passage to look for residences, where residence is mentioned and what words have been mentioned in the passage for residence. Okay, so the first option is abodes, amenities, connections, dwellings, habitations, hillsides, terrain. So I want you to pause the video here and try to read the passage now and look for the meaning, the words with the same meaning as residence. And when you come back, we are going to discuss the answers together. So let's look at this exercise together. And I'm going to read this article and see what words have the same meaning. There is a part of Spain's sun-baked Andalusia that is extraordinary, not only because it's unspoiled terrain and authentic Spanish traditions, but also because it's caves. These are not dark, damp holes with dripping water and evil smells. They are residences, ancient Bronze Age dwellings. So dwellings is used for residences. You can see it here. They are residences, ancient Bronze Age dwellings. And dwellings is also has the same meaning as residence, right? People where you live, it's also called dwellings. So that's one. We got one. This is multiple choice, multiple answer. So we'll stick with that. Now being refurbished for hundreds of 21st century Spaniards. In Galera, the region's most important village, it is estimated that there are at least 1,000 such habitations carved into its hillsides. Habitation has the same meaning as residences, so habitation is also a correct option. I'm going to take two options already by whatever I have read so far. We take old caves, renovate them, then sell them on, says Rob Oakley, office manager of leading developer Galera Enterprises. Our company was set up by someone who discovered the area of Galera when it was just a tourist attraction 15 years ago and saw its potential. The ancient abodes are transformed from rough caves into relatively luxurious homes, abodes. Abodes are transformed from rough caves. It's mentioning that abodes where people live are transformed from rough caves into relatively luxurious homes. Now they are built as luxurious homes. So abode is also being used as residence, isn't it? So I've already got 3 options so far. Let's keep reading and see if we can find more. Are transformed from rough caves into relatively luxurious homes equipped out with amenities like electricity, sewage, phone lines, running hot water, even internet connections. Now, if you look at the first option, you've got the abode, that's one. Amenities, and what are amenities? They are the things that are used in the residences, not the residences itself, and it describes amenities as electricity, sewage, phone lines, running hot water, and internet connection. These are amenities, so they can't be residences. So you can eliminate that. And it also talks about connections like internet connections, so that can't be your residences. You can eliminate that. Dwellings, it's been mentioned, Bronze Age dwellings, so that is your correct answer. And you've got habitations. It's also mentioned that 1,000 such habitations carved into its hillsides. That's also mentioned as residences, so that's correct. Hillside is where it was located. It's near the hill, so that is the location. That's not residence, so you can eliminate that. And terrain is basically the physical structure of the land, and it's describing the terrain as unspoiled terrain, where it's basically the geographical location of the area. Okay, so that cannot be residence. So let's look at the explanation here. Number 1 is correct, abodes. This response is correct because abodes is a synonym for residence. Abodes is described as ancient, and since the residences were previously described as ancient Bronze Age dwellings, it can be inferred that they are the same thing. Amenities, this response is incorrect because amenities are things that the residents are equipped out with, but not equivalent to. So you can eliminate that. Connections, this response is incorrect because connections is listed as one of the amenities provided by the residences. Dwellings, this response is correct because dwellings is a synonym for residences. In the text, dwellings is used to further explain residences. And the last one, you've got habitations. This response is correct because habitation is a synonym for residences. Also, the word such modifies habitations and links it to the residences mentioned in the previous sentence. So I showed you how you can look at all of these things and all of these words, and you can guess the meaning of. I wanted to add a little bit of layer on top of the lesson that we had previously for multiple choice, multiple answer. We talked about understanding the gist of if the prompt asks you to identify the gist or the main idea behind the passage, you want to read the passage first before reading the options, and once you summarize and you got the main idea of the passage, it will be super easy for you to identify the correct option. And sometimes it's going to ask you to infer the meaning or find the synonyms. Obviously, you want to read the options first and look for the word that is mentioned in the prompt and find the synonyms in the passage. So inferring the meaning, we looked at inferring the meaning, and we also looked at the synonyms. A lot of words and the synonyms and antonyms, and do use thesaurus if you want to, use dictionaries if you want to, and do a lot of practice. Practice is key. You want to do at least 20 to 30 multiple choice, multiple answer questions, and that is going to set you up for success.